This is the County Sheriff's Office! Shut your vehicle off and put your keys out the window! Put your hands up! Hands up! Step out of the vehicle! Face away from me!
I should probably look on my phone on the camera.
Gotta be honest with you, dude. I don't care.
Well, it'll be the bodies of the 2 people I murdered tonight.
Eaton County Sheriff's Department received a phone call from Christina, who stated she was in fear for her life. A man was texting from outside of her apartment.
She told us she had been in a relationship with him and she was scared that he was going to find her and do God knows what.
She said just days prior to this incident, the suspect abused her to where a personal protection order was granted.
She relayed information about being choked, being thrown to the ground. He had made statements to her that he would slit her throat while she was sleeping, in addition to her young son's throat. Kiernan was an active parolee. He had been to prison for an assault involving strangulation. He was known to be violent toward women.
Now Kiernan stopped by her apartment and was outside. Our patrol deputies get called in to the scene to get her out of the house and make sure that she is safe.
First and foremost, we make sure that she was safe. At that point, I instructed all of my deputies to go to that area in an attempt to locate Kiernan. We were very concerned and alarmed that he may be violent again. When he sent the message stating, "See, you brought friends to the party," and it brought a level of, is he going to harm us as well? Where is he? Is he going to shoot us without us knowing? Is he going to ambush us? We absolutely believe that he was a danger and most likely was in possession of some sort of weapon. We were actively and methodically trying to find him to the best of our ability.
Pull over. All units, hold you.
This is the Eaton County Sheriff's Office! Shut your vehicle off and put your keys out the window! Put your hands up! Hands up! Step out of the vehicle! Face away from me! Walk backwards to the sound of my voice! Keep coming, keep your hands up!
They got him out of the car, took him into custody on the side of the road. He was very cavalier, not a care in the world.
Hey, where you from? Yeah. Who got to tow your car? The closest one down here would be like Countryside out of Charlotte or Davis out of Charlotte.
Maybe I should probably look on my phone on the camera.
Gotta be honest with you, dude. I don't care.
I took that as, okay, he wants to show me the messages that his girlfriend sent and how mean she is. Or she's the one contacting me. I'm just innocent here.
Well, it'll be the bodies of the 2 people I murdered tonight.
Okay. So you killed a couple people tonight?
Yeah.
Where was that at?
Look on my phone.
Okay. Good. Where's his phone at?
It's an emergency to check it.
He said to look at his phone on the camera. Oh boy.
What the hell?
Yeah,
As soon as I pulled up the photos, I could start seeing the horrific images of 2 females. And it appeared that they were murdered. It was heinous, gruesome. There's wounds and blunt force trauma. It's very difficult to kind of wrap our mind around what we were seeing. Is this real? Is this something he just got off the internet and he's playing a trick on us?
No police agency had even gotten a call that there was a potential homicide or crime scene. We didn't have any information yet.
What's this saying?
I don't know, dude. Okay, can you step over here for me, sir, please? I'm gonna have you have a seat right in the back seat here, okay?
My approach was casual. I wanted to do my best to keep an easygoing conversation between us, even though we were talking about something so horrific.
What's your first name? Kiernan, is that how you pronounce Kiernan? I don't want to pronounce it incorrectly. You're a smart guy, I'm sure. Right? Pretty intelligent? Yeah. Okay. Where are those people at, man?
Yeah, let me out, I'll tell you. My back hurts.
I'm sorry, what? I couldn't hear you, buddy, with all this.
I'll tell you my back hurts. I can't go nowhere.
Yeah, go ahead and stand out here if that's... Watch your step, man. Okay. You okay?
Yeah.
All right. Where are they at?
One of them is in the place I was just at, Nights Inn, East Lansing.
Nights Inn in East Lansing?
Room 215. She's in the bathtub.
Okay. Nights Inn,
The other
room 215 in East Lansing.
is in Dorchester Apartments, somewhere.
Okay. Nights Inn in East Lansing. No. And who's at the Nights Inn in East Lansing? Who is that?
Julie Mooney.
Julie Mooney?
Yeah.
Okay. And then on Dorchester, what's that person's name?
Kaylee.
As I spoke with Kiernan, he's telling me in that same demeanor where this is just a regular day for him. There is no physiological reaction from him that he was under stress, that his heart was racing, that he was afraid, that he was questioning what was going to happen to him. He was just very direct. I have never encountered anything like this.
When deputies arrived at the scene, it was dark, it was very early in the morning, and they approached it with caution. It could potentially be a very dangerous situation for them to walk into. Deputies had their guns drawn. We didn't know if there was still a suspect outstanding or what they were going to encounter. Deputies made entry, and they located Julie Mooney deceased in that hotel room.
Julie Mooney was left in a bathtub. She had cutting wounds and blunt force trauma.
It was a very horrific crime scene. Senior investigators were affected by what they saw. They had simply never seen anything like that.
Julie was a caring and giving person. She gave a lot. She gave her heart, and she loved her daughters. And she really wanted to become a social worker. She had these aspirations of a person who was working to help people. Julie participated in 3 or 4 mission trips. She rebuilt some poverty-stricken homes. Julie was very musical. She and her friend, they started the flag corps for the marching band. They did all of the choreographing to the music with the band director and all of that. I really miss her. She was a good daughter. My home is lonely.
We responded to the address, and once we made our announcements and didn't hear anything inside, we went ahead and opened the door, which was unlocked. We enter, we make more announcements. We still didn't get any response inside.
They cleared the first floor and then went upstairs.
And then turning to my left appeared to be a bedroom door. and that's when I went ahead and opened that bedroom door. As soon as I opened that door, you could see a female subject that was laying face down in the bed. Her head and the pillow was soaked in blood. She suffered a pretty serious head injury from what we could observe, as well as she had multiple lacerations all over her body. It was very evident that this was in fact a homicide. We had approximate weight, eye, hair color, things like that. We were able to look up in our programs, everything was matching up that this was in fact Kaylee Brock.
When I found out that Kaylee was murdered, I was in shock. I had so much shock that somebody would do this to such a sweet and innocent soul. I was sad. I was angry. It was really hard to believe and grasp. Kaylee was very much a people person. Her smile just lit up the room, and everybody loved her. Kaylee loved cooking, and she loved watching the Rachel Ray shows. And she loved reading and going to craft shows with her family. She still had so much life left.
Detective Kramer from Kingdom County. Sergeant or Crane from Meridian Township.
Because he confessed on the side of the road doesn't implicate him in everything. There's still a lot of details needed from the investigative side to lock him into a statement, to prove that it was him.
We didn't know. Was he in collusion with somebody else? Was there more than two victims? And you got to be on your A game to get out of them what you need them to say. Right now, the most critical part of this investigation is get him talking.
Start with, where are you from? You live local here somewhere? Yeah. You're on a parole detainer, so you're on parole, I assume? Tell us what happened yesterday. Yesterday? Tell me what happened with Kaylee. When did you go over there yesterday? I don't know what time. What led to the altercation that you had?
When you see a forensics van outside, you know that, something, drastic has happened.
Sheriff's officials say deputies found 2 women killed, one in Holt and the other in Meridian Township. A man from Eaton County was arrested early this morning after an old girlfriend called police. During the arrest, he told deputies he had pictures to show them of the 2 women he killed.
I was running errands. When I got home, there were police cars in my driveway. And my husband was on the front porch with one of the officers at that time. And I was told that Julie had been murdered. I was running a horror story through my head, and I couldn't believe the horror story I had in my head could have been any worse than what actually happened.
What about, what's your girl's name that's in the hotel room? Julie. What about Julie? Did you have an altercation with Julie?
No. No altercation.
During the traffic stop, he was pretty open that he had just murdered a couple of people.
You guys should probably look on my phone on the camera. It'll be the bodies of the 2 people I murdered tonight.
That little bit of time that he sat in a jail cell leading up to it changed the demeanor drastically.
We thought he changed his mind, or he just decided he was going to play a game with us and stop talking.
Now, he refused to make eye contact. He was in a very defensive kind of shelled position. So I was trying to keep my line of questioning soft, my tone calm and quiet. I wanted to mimic his tone to keep building a rapport and switch the topic to get him to open up.
Who is this girl that you know that lives here in Delta?
Christina.
Christina? Who is she? Wife, girlfriend?
Girlfriend.
So what led you to her apartment yesterday?
I just wanted to see if she was home.
Did you call her or knock on her door or anything?
No. Did text her though. She's whining in cuffs now. She called the police. I was going to give her money. I wasn't going to need it. And decided it wasn't a good idea. But the only thing I would have done was scare her.
You didn't want to scare her?
Yeah. I love her. But I had issues. That's why we didn't work out. I was kind of mad because, she said I hurt her and her son. I never hurt her son. Did I hurt her? Yeah, you can hurt the dog. Of course. I never hurt her son.
Sounds like your girlfriend is a good person. She was keeping you based a little bit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
When things went bad, it just kind of changed for you.
Mm-hmm. Something inside of me snapped.
This is the first time that he really started talking on his own. He opened up rather than one-word answers. I knew that if I can keep him comfortable, he's going to continue to talk with me. The next direction to go was we needed to figure out how Kaylee and Julie ended up victims.
Oh, you know Kaylee and Julie?
Mm-hmm. Julie only a couple months. Co-worker.
What about Kaylee? Where do you know her from?
I was known her from church years ago.
So what led you to Kaylee's apartment yesterday?
I just went over there.
She let you in? And then what happened when you got inside?
We just talked.
What'd you guys talk about?
I told her I was going to leave and submit myself tonight. Submit myself to get mentally evaluated.
Why are you trying to submit yourself to get mentally evaluated? Do you have it on your time or something?
Yeah, as you can tell, I got a lot wrong with me. But I guess it was too late.
You mean it was too late? What do you mean by that?
This damage is done. You know, it's like understand myself. It's like I talk to myself. I'll sit there and just be like, just had a full-fledged deep conversation for a whole half hour. It's a voice in my head. But it's not like it's more of a thought. It's not a voice.
Right. So have you been battling that thought or voice
all my life?
He was very difficult to deal with. And it seemed like he was playing games with us. I had to get every potential detail out of him before he shut down. It was pretty direct, pointed questions from then on.
Tell me what happened with Kaylee.
Mm-hmm.
Tell me how you killed Kaylee.
With the hammer.
Where in Kaylee's apartment did you kill her?
In her bedroom.
What the hammer look like?
It's a ball pen. Point.
What happened?
I told her I'd give her a massage. That's what I was doing. And then I grabbed the hammer out of my bag. And I just slammed the hammer into her head.
In the head?
Mm-hmm. It was like one blow and that was it.
Did you just surprise him with a hammer?
I don't know.
I guess it's just... If you were to come to my house and bring a hammer, it would make me go, huh.
You didn't know I...
Did you have a bag or something that you brought in?
Yeah.
What else is in the bag?
Just the knives. That's it.
Did you use a knife at all?
Yeah. I cut her.
Okay. How long did you stay there after you killed her?
15 minutes.
That was a very difficult confession for us to get. Once I got him to admit to killing Kaylee, it was a matter of delicately withdrawing the facts about Julie. You don't want to trigger any remorse, regret, anything in him to think that he shouldn't be talking.
And then you drive straight to Julie's, or did you go somewhere in between?
I went to the hotel.
Straight from Kaylee's apartment to the hotel? How long was it that you were at the hotel before Julie got there?
She was there before me. I was waiting in her car. She wasn't actually going to come. So I told Julie I was going to pack my bags. And I was going to get submitted tonight.
So, I just want to make sure I have this clear. You go to Kaylee's apartment, kill her, drive straight to the motel room. Julie's waiting for you in the parking lot. Tell me about the hotel room when you got there with Julie. You guys just hang out for a little bit, or what happened?
Yeah, we just hung out.
What were you doing?
She just kept watching me, overly watching me, for some reason. And she sat down in a chair on the top. You know, I was like, all right. And then I went over behind her and I hit her with my hand.
What part of her head did you hit? So you're behind her and she turns this way?
No, I hit the back of her head. Her head snapped forward.
Did you lay her down on the floor, or did she fall out of the chair?
No, I thought I hit her a whole bunch more times. And so she fell out of the chair.
And that's when you cut her?
Yeah.
It's very shocking as an investigator to have somebody willing to answer pointed questions with zero remorse. I was looking in the eyes of just pure evil. But if at any point in this we would have shown our disgust or our anger, you don't know how that would have affected him. And so us remaining calm and emotionless was key to allow him to keep talking.
Did you put her in the bathtub? Take her from the...
Yeah, dragged her.
Into the bathroom?
Yeah.
How'd you get her in there?
Blanket. Put a blanket beneath her and drag the blanket.
Do you leave the blanket there?
No, yeah, I left it in the bathtub.
Did you take anything from Kaylee or from Julie? Take anything with you?
I did, actually. I took her hair clip. Julie's.
What did that look like?
It's just a little hair clip. Got me from Kaylee.
Do you know why you took those?
Just memory, you know. It's like souvenir.
We had a solid confession. Next was very important for us to show he was perfectly competent while planning it and perfectly competent while executing it.
Suspects can be crafty, and they'll come back and say, well, I was crazy that night, or I didn't know what I was doing. Kiernan could be planting the seed about being insane at the time.
I needed to shut down a future insanity defense. So the more intimate details that I could get him to give me was all to show he very clearly intended to do this strategically with a purpose and not get caught.
Say anything before they know that anything was going to happen?
No.
And there was no argument or altercation or anything?
No.
Or was that what you thought you were going to do when you went there?
No.
Were they bad people?
No. Really wasn't. She was just trying to help me.
You're obviously fighting some demons, man. You have been for a long time, it sounds like. Right? When you're doing this, you killed him with the hammer. Did that make you feel better when you did that? Or why did you do that?
No, it didn't make me feel better.
Okay. Did it make you feel worse? Just didn't feel it.
I didn't feel anything.
This was a difficult interview. You know what he's done and you know what he's capable of. And it was kind of like pulling teeth to get anything out of him.
Sometimes there's a cat and mouse game, right? I'm not just going to come out and say it. You're going to have to get it out of me. But the more you can keep him talking about what he did that night, then we're winning in that interview.
Has your feelings always been to do it like with a knife or with a hammer or with a weapon?
The weapon's choice was a hammer, I guess.
Where did you get the hammer from?
I went and bought it.
When?
A couple of days ago.
Is that the only thing you bought there?
No, I bought knives.
How many knives did you buy?
2.
So was at that point you knew you were going to do something?
Yeah.
Did you clean the knives off between the two?
Yeah. I cleaned up everything and then...
What do you mean you cleaned up everything?
Like I wiped it down and stuff.
You mean the room or the...
Yeah, it was kind of messy.
What did you use to clean it up?
Just towels.
Did you leave them there or did you just get rid of them?
I left them there.
Then what happened?
I actually drove back to Kaylee's apartment. My mind kept playing with me like she's alive or something, so I wanted to make sure she was dead. Almost as if she wouldn't be there when I got back.
And what did you do when you went back in the second time?
I took her phone. I threw it out on the road. I threw her and Julie's phone out.
Both at the same place?
Mm-hmm. In case somebody called looking for them.
It just showed that he calculated the steps, the risks. And it was just one more cognitive step that he made to cover up, process, and continue this killing spree. We shut down that avenue of, I blacked out, I don't know what happened. He didn't lose all cognitive abilities, and he knew leading up to this what he was going to do. We located the backpack in his car that contains our murder weapons, both the hammer and a folding knife that was used. All of the weapons had been cleaned, but still had DNA on them. We also received surveillance video from the hotel.
The video at the Night's Inn showing both him and Julie is extremely significant, puts him with Julie at the time of the murder. It also takes away any chance that anyone else was involved. We also had video of Kiernan buying murder weapons at one of the local grocery stores. The biggest thing is just showing the intent, showing the planning. There was no other reason to buy those things at that time in his life, so it was clearly that he was preparing to commit murder.
Is it okay with you if I look at these pictures that are on your phone?
It's my coworker, Julie.
He seemed to kind of perk up when he heard the videos play. His body language and posture and everything changed, almost where he was proud of his work and what he had done. He was demonic, like a sociopath, making me question, are there more victims?
Ever thought about doing this before tonight?
You've had this thoughts since you were young?
You ever acted on them before?
No.
Just these two?
It's like this. Recently, things spiraled out of control, and something inside of me snapped. It actually started like, it's like, yeah, I might be crazy, but I was standing next to Julie the other day, and like, I just wanted to kill her, you know? It was like a strongest desire I've ever had. It was weird.
The disturbing part about it is this is when he's becoming the most open. This is when he's elaborating more. This is when he's comfortable talking, is getting into these dirty secrets that he's had his whole life.
It's like something inside of me took over. I don't know.
You've had this before, but it felt different?
I had it before, yeah. The girl that I went to prison over.
But you didn't follow through on that one?
No.
What did you go to prison for?
Strangulation.
Was there going to be any more?
Just planning on try getting other people to come with. So
do you think plan on keeping people coming in and you're just going to keep putting them in the bathroom?
Yeah. Well, until the smell started, it had like this copper smell to it, you know? It's metallic. Just like what the books say. I'd never understood that until I experienced it myself. Just had this, you know?
Is there a list of people you wanted to kill?
Just tried to get at least 4.
Why was 4 the number?
I don't know. Guess it's just a goal. It's a lot of work. It's not easy. It's not like I'm using a gun.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot involved in it. It's personal.
You know that he wants to talk about what he did. If it's been on a psychopath's mind for so long, you're going to want to play on that, and you're going to want to delve into it.
Another girl at my work. She tries to help me too. But she struggles with a lot of demons as well. I think I would have killed her differently.
How do you think you would have done it?
But she's the girl that I always wanted to have sex with. You know, I'm smoking with girls.
Mm-hmm. But do you think you would have actually killed her differently, like not with a hammer? Or what do you mean by that?
There probably would have been a sexual component of her.
Did you talk to her at all yesterday?
Yeah, you text her.
She was sick.
When Kiernan started talking about the other people he was intending to target that night, that was bone-chilling. It was important to identify who those individuals were and physically make contact to make sure that they were alive.
Still in class.
Why her?
Because she wrestles with a lot of demons as well.
How'd you get a hold of her?
Facebook Messenger.
Is that how you communicated with Kaylee and Julie?
Yeah.
I opened Kiernan Brown's phone and I pulled up his Facebook and located the friends by the names that he'd given me and began sifting through the text messages with his intended victims.
One of them he had sent a text message to and asked if he could come over and sleep on her couch. The other one he sent text message to was a classmate of his.
She was a single mother who borrowed a book from him, and Kiernan, in his ploy, stated that he needed the book back. I sent those profiles out to the team outside to find those individuals.
As we got the information, we call it run code, lights and siren. We had as fast as we could determine where these young ladies lived, to get there as quick as we could. There's potentially 2 young ladies that had been harmed or even murdered by this guy.
We have the 3 teams out trying to find and identify these 2 other intended victims. My goal was to continue digging through the details that I needed for the case.
How long were you over at Christina's for?
5 minutes.
You didn't have any intentions of killing her?
No. I love her.
What makes her different?
She was just here.
When you left Christina's, where did you go?
I just got in the car and just took off.
Where were you headed?
Chicago.
Do you know anybody in Chicago?
Large city, though.
You were off to Chicago and that's when you got stopped?
Yeah.
Was your plan for just heading out of a bigger city? Traveling down?
I was trying to get third person. The time was really it was going to be a whatever I seen.
It's just for any person.
I know, I remember something when I was 18. One of my sisters in Illinois, one night I just took a knife. I tried to hunt people down. It didn't work out.
Why didn't it work out?
Couldn't find a person in the right settings. Wasn't as determined, I guess.
Ever told anybody about that before?
No. So what would you guys call me? Serial killer.
I just think you need some help, bro.
Yeah, I do.
That's what I think.
But it's coming too late, you know?
Never too late for help.
I don't think they have hospitals anymore. I think you just have a person.
When he asked me if I thought he was a serial killer, he was looking for that. He wanted that reputation, that title. And it was important for me not to give him that credit and not make him as glorified as he thought he was.
Is there anything else that you can think of to help us get all this stuff cleaned up? Any other messages, notes, weapons, bloody clothes?
No.
At that point, we ended the interrogation. We had everything we needed, and personally, we couldn't tolerate the vile nature of the things he was saying any longer.
We'll run you back upstairs and might come chat with you again if we think anything else, okay?
All right. Thank you.
When we walked out of the interview, we were certain that we had a solid confession. He was perfectly competent while planning it, perfectly competent while executing it, and perfectly competent while providing us details.
The other potential victims that were named by Kiernan were ultimately located and found to be safe. One of them he had sent a text message to and asked if he could come over and sleep on her couch. She just flat out said no.
The other one he sent text messages to told me she was asleep and didn't see them, and had she not fallen asleep, would have left to get him that book because she felt bad that she still had it. He was lining them up for the night, and luckily the 2 victims didn't respond the way he wanted.
You can't say enough about the incredible police work done by the Eaton County Sheriff's Office. I don't think there's any doubt that the suspect was on a killing spree, and his quick capture probably saved many lives.
While in jail, Kiernan Brown altered his appearance by tattooing his entire face.
It's almost like he's trying to really show the world what he's like on the inside. He really looks like the monster that he is.
You killed because you are evil. You came from behind because you are a coward. If you weren't, you would have killed yourself just like you told Julie you were thinking about. You leave our family and friends with undescribable grief.
You took 2 individuals who all they wanted to do was provide help to you. You embody hate and selfishness and cruelty.
Ultimately, Kieran Brown pled guilty and received a 70 to 100-year sentence, which puts him at 100 years old at his first available chance of parole.
The interrogation in this case was really difficult. There's no one-size-fits-all when it comes to interviews. You need to be really good at reading people, reading both verbal and nonverbal body skills to get to the truth. Detective Kramer did a really good job with Kieran Brown and getting out of him exactly what he had done.
This is the most gruesome and emotionally difficult cases that I've gone through in my career. Being able to eliminate people like Kieran Brown just solidify and motivate me to keep doing what we do every day.
The world is missing a very special person. It is very hard to believe and grasp. Kaylee had a motto, let the light lift you up, and she did live by that. We would have bad days, and Kaylee definitely helped lift us up.
I had a sensation come over me a couple of days after she passed. I was in the kitchen, and I felt her arms around me. And it was just like some other time when she'd had her arms around me. It just felt that way. A couple of friends had dreams of Julie, and Julie says she's fine. I don't know how I feel about spirits, but I know I'll see her again.
After 50 years, the mystery of the girl in the box finally has an answer the girl in the box case. There are crimes that terrify because of what we know. Then there are crimes that refuse to die because of what we never learn. A body abandoned in silence. A name erased before anyone could remember it. A face frozen in time while decades pass outside the evidence room. For nearly half a century, one young woman existed only as a question. She was called many things by investigators. Jane Doe, the girl in the box, a victim without a past, a murder without justice. Every generation believed it might finally uncover the truth. Every generation failed. Until modern science forced open a door that had remained sealed for almost 50 years, revealing answers that no detective of the 1970s could have imagined. The story begins long before laboratories could read DNA like a fingerprint. It begins in an America wrestling with rising violent crime, where thousands of missing person reports disappeared into filing cabinets and local police departments struggled with limited technology. A time when fingerprints could be compared only by hand, dental records often vanished with small-town paperwork, and a victim without identification could disappear twice, once in death and once again in memory. The discovery itself was horrifying in its simplicity. A quiet stretch of land. An ordinary day. Nothing suggested that beneath the stillness lay a secret capable of haunting investigators for generations. Someone noticed an abandoned wooden container. Weathered. Unremarkable. The kind of object most people would walk past without a second glance. But something felt wrong. Perhaps it was its placement. Perhaps it was instinct. Whatever the reason, authorities were called. When officers forced the container open, the silence ended. Inside lay the body of a young female. No identification. No explanation. No obvious witness. Just a carefully concealed victim whose final moments had been erased almost completely. Investigators immediately recognized they were facing more than a homicide. They were facing a mystery. The victim appeared young, But estimating age was never an exact science. Clothing offered few reliable clues. Personal belongings were absent. Whoever had left her there had removed almost everything capable of answering the most basic question. Who is she? The first hours after any murder are often the most important. Memories remain fresh. Tire tracks survive before weather destroys them. Witnesses still remember unfamiliar vehicles. Yet in this case, precious time had already disappeared before authorities even arrived. No one knew exactly when the container had been abandoned. No one knew how long the victim had been there. Every passing hour widened the gap between the crime and those trying to solve it. Crime scene technicians worked methodically, documenting every surface, every fiber, every trace that might survive examination. The wooden container itself became evidence. Its construction, nails, hinges, dimensions, manufacturing marks, everything was photographed and catalogued. Detectives hoped that somewhere inside the craftsmanship was a clue pointing toward the killer. Instead, the evidence raised even more questions. The container appeared ordinary enough to be purchased without attracting attention. Nothing immediately distinguished it as unique. No obvious fingerprints survived in usable condition. Exposure to the elements had already begun erasing what little physical evidence remained. The victim herself became the center of the investigation. Medical examiners searched for scars, old injuries, dental work, anything capable of connecting her to medical records somewhere in the country. Every detail was documented with painstaking care because they understood something terrifying. If they failed to identify her quickly, she might remain anonymous forever. Autopsy findings painted a grim picture. The young woman had not died naturally. She had been murdered. The exact sequence of events leading to her death remained difficult to reconstruct, but investigators concluded that someone had intentionally ended her life before concealing the body inside the wooden container. The method suggested planning rather than panic. The disposal appeared deliberate. This was not someone abandoning evidence in haste. Whoever committed the crime had taken time to reduce the chances of identification. That realization transformed the case. Detectives were no longer searching merely for a killer. They were searching for someone capable of extraordinary calculation. News of the discovery spread rapidly through local communities. Newspaper headlines described the unidentified victim in stark, unsettling language. Citizens studied the reconstructed descriptions, hoping to recognize a daughter, a sister, a neighbor, a co-worker. Telephone lines filled with tips. Some callers believed the victim resembled a missing teenager. Others insisted she looked like someone who had once worked at a nearby restaurant. Each lead generated hope. Each lead collapsed under investigation. The frustration grew with every dead end. Police contacted neighboring jurisdictions. Missing person reports arrived from multiple states. Photographs were compared one after another. Families endured the unbearable experience of wondering whether the unidentified young woman might be someone they loved. Again and again, investigators delivered the same answer. Not a match. Weeks became months. Months became years. The victim remained nameless. Without an identity, every investigative path reached the same wall. Where had she lived? Who were her friends? Who last saw her alive? Did anyone know she was missing? Every answer depended on discovering her name. Without that single piece of information, detectives were attempting to solve a puzzle while missing its center. The community refused to forget. Flowers occasionally appeared near the location where the body had been found. People who never knew the victim felt connected to her simply because no one else could speak for her. Local conversations returned repeatedly to the same heartbreaking possibility. Somewhere, perhaps hundreds of miles away, a family might still be waiting for a daughter who had never come home. As the investigation expanded, detectives examined the container itself from another perspective. Transport. A wooden box containing a human body is not easily moved. Someone had carried it, loaded it, unloaded it, possibly with assistance. Did neighbors hear unusual noises? Did anyone notice a truck stopping late at night? Investigators retraced roads leading toward the disposal site, searching for businesses equipped with security cameras. But the decade offered little technological help. Modern investigators often reconstruct a suspect's movements through digital footprints, cell phones, surveillance systems, electronic transactions, GPS data. None of those advantages existed here. The killer had moved through a world largely invisible to technology. Every mile traveled disappeared into history. Artists created facial reconstructions based on the victim's remains. Newspapers published them repeatedly, hoping someone would recognize familiar eyes or the curve of a smile. Television broadcasts reached wider audiences. Still nothing. Anonymous. Always anonymous. As years passed, the file grew thicker while certainty grew thinner. Detectives retired. New investigators inherited boxes filled with reports written by predecessors they had never met. Every generation reopened the evidence with fresh optimism. Every generation believed they might notice the overlooked clue. One detective focused on regional missing person databases. Another re-examined forensic evidence using improved laboratory methods. Another interviewed surviving witnesses decades after their original statements. Each effort produced fragments. None produced a name. The emotional burden shifted as well. At first, investigators chased a recent homicide. Later, they became guardians of memory. Many admitted privately that the victim deserved at least one thing before the case faded forever: her identity. Without it, she remained trapped between existence and oblivion. The years transformed the mystery into local legend. Children grew up hearing whispers about the girl found inside a wooden box. Adults debated theories in diners, barbershops, and family kitchens. Some believed the killer had been a stranger passing through town. Others suspected someone close to the victim had hidden the crime with chilling precision. Speculation filled the silence left by missing facts. Rumors multiplied. Evidence did not. Meanwhile, forensic science evolved at breathtaking speed. Techniques unimaginable during the original investigation slowly became standard practice. DNA profiling revolutionized criminal investigations during the late 20th century, solving cases once considered impossible. Yet even that breakthrough depended on comparison samples. Without relatives in criminal or missing person databases, many unidentified victims remained beyond reach. The girl in the box became one of them. Her biological evidence waited patiently inside refrigerated storage. Year after year. Decade after decade. Scientists improved extraction methods. Computers became faster. Genetic databases expanded. Cold case investigators watched each technological leap with cautious optimism. Perhaps next year. Perhaps the year after. Perhaps one more advancement would finally reveal what decades of detective work could not. Yet hope repeatedly collided with reality. DNA existed. But whose DNA was it? Without relatives for comparison, even perfect genetic material could become another locked door. The case refused to surrender. By the time nearly 50 years had passed, many original investigators had died. Witnesses aged. Memories faded. Buildings disappeared. Roads changed. Entire neighborhoods transformed. The physical landscape remembered almost nothing. Only the evidence remained faithful. Stored carefully. Labeled meticulously. Waiting for a future no one in the 1970s could have predicted. Across America, cold cases once dismissed as unsolvable began falling one after another through the emerging field of investigative genetic genealogy. Families curious about their ancestry unknowingly provided distant genetic connections capable of identifying unknown victims decades after death. What once required fingerprints or dental records could now begin with tiny fragments of inherited DNA stretching across generations. For detectives responsible for the girl in the box investigation, that scientific revolution represented something they had not experienced in years. Not certainty. Not victory. Something even more dangerous. Hope. Because if the victim finally received her name, every unanswered question buried beneath 50 years of silence would suddenly become reachable. Her family could be found, her final movements reconstructed, her relationships examined. Every forgotten memory waiting inside old photographs, family albums, school records, and faded conversations might finally emerge from the darkness. The investigation that had spent decades trapped in anonymity was standing on the edge of an entirely new beginning, and somewhere inside the evidence preserved against all odds lay the first fragile thread capable of leading detectives back through half a century of shadows toward the truth. The investigation entered its most difficult stage almost as soon as it began. Detectives had a victim but no confirmed identity, a homicide but no obvious suspect, and a crime scene that seemed to reveal less with every passing day. Every document produced during those first weeks reflected the same reality. Progress depended on answering a single question. Who was the young woman found inside the wooden container? Investigators started where every homicide inquiry begins. They cataloged the physical evidence, interviewed residents living near the recovery site, and compared the victim's characteristics against missing person reports filed across surrounding jurisdictions. The process was painstaking. Before computerized databases connected police agencies nationwide, much of the work relied on phone calls, mailed photographs, and handwritten records. Each potential match required time, and most ended the same way, with another unanswered question. The container itself became an important piece of evidence. Detectives examined its construction, materials, and signs of wear, hoping it might indicate where it had been purchased or how long it had been in use before becoming part of the crime. While it provided valuable forensic observations, nothing linked it conclusively to a particular individual. Like so much else in the case, it suggested planning but stopped short of revealing who had done the planning. Attention soon turned to the possibility that the victim had come from outside the immediate area. Homicide investigators know that where a body is discovered is not always where the crime occurred. If that were true here, the investigation immediately expanded beyond county lines. Missing person bulletins from neighboring states were reviewed. Law enforcement agencies exchanged information, looking for even the smallest point of overlap. None produced a definitive identification. As weeks became months, investigators also faced the limitations of the era's forensic science. DNA profiling did not yet exist. Digital surveillance was decades away. Mobile phone records, electronic transactions, and location data, tools that routinely support modern investigations, were simply unavailable. The case depended on witness testimony, physical evidence, and persistence. Witness interviews produced fragments rather than answers. Some recalled unfamiliar vehicles. Others believed they had noticed unusual activity near the area where the body was found. Investigators documented every statement, knowing that even inconsistent accounts can later become meaningful when viewed alongside new evidence. Still, none of the information was sufficient to identify either the victim or the person responsible. With each passing year, the case slowly transitioned from an active homicide investigation into what detectives call a cold case. That label did not mean the investigation had ended. It meant that every immediate lead had been exhausted, while the evidence remained preserved for the day when new information or new technology might change everything. For many investigators, the greatest frustration was not the absence of a suspect, but the absence of a name. Without knowing who the victim was, reconstructing her final days proved extraordinarily difficult. Friends could not be interviewed because they were unknown. Family members could not report changes in behavior because they had not been located. Employment records, school records, medical histories, and travel patterns all remained inaccessible behind the single unanswered question that had haunted the case from the beginning. Despite those challenges, The investigation was never formally forgotten. Detectives periodically reopened the file, reviewing reports with fresh eyes and applying advances in forensic science whenever possible. Each generation inherited not only the evidence, but also the responsibility to continue asking the same question that had echoed through decades of investigative work. By the early 21st century, forensic technology had advanced beyond what the original investigators could have imagined. DNA analysis became increasingly sophisticated, and new approaches to identifying unknown victims began transforming cold case investigations across the United States. Cases once considered impossible suddenly became solvable, provided that biological evidence had been preserved. In this investigation, it had. The evidence collected decades earlier remained available for re-examination. What had once been carefully stored with little expectation of immediate success was now viewed through an entirely different lens. Detectives recognized that the future of the case might no longer depend on finding a forgotten witness. It might instead depend on science capable of uncovering connections that had remained invisible for nearly 50 years. The case was entering a new era. Not because the mystery had become any less complex, but because the tools available to solve it had fundamentally changed. For the first time in decades, investigators believed that the victim's identity might no longer be beyond reach. For years, the case remained defined by two words that investigators never wanted to see attached to a homicide: unidentified victim. Every new detective assigned to the file encountered the same obstacle. Before they could determine who had taken the young woman's life, they first had to establish who she was. The investigative file continued to grow even as new evidence became increasingly scarce. Detectives revisited witness statements, compared notes from the original crime scene examination, and reviewed every lead that had once appeared promising. In many instances, those leads had been exhausted decades earlier. Some witnesses had relocated. Others had died. Memories that had once been clear inevitably faded with time, making reinvestigation progressively more difficult. One constant remained: the physical evidence collected during the original investigation. The decision to preserve that evidence proved critical. Advances in forensic science have repeatedly demonstrated that material once considered insignificant can later become central to solving a case. Clothing fibers, biological samples, trace evidence, and preserved documentation all took on renewed importance as laboratory techniques improved over the years. Throughout the 1980s and 1990s, forensic DNA analysis transformed criminal investigations around the world. Cases that had relied almost exclusively on eyewitness testimony could now be supported, or contradicted, by biological evidence. Yet for unidentified victims, DNA alone was often not enough. A genetic profile could distinguish one individual from another, but without a reference sample from relatives or an existing database entry, it could not automatically provide a name. Investigators therefore pursued multiple avenues simultaneously. Missing person reports continued to be compared against the victim's estimated age, physical characteristics, and available forensic findings. Dental records were reviewed whenever a potential match emerged. In each instance, investigators relied on objective comparison rather than assumption. Most inquiries ended with the same conclusion: the available evidence did not support a positive identification. By the early 21st century, cold case investigations across the United States were entering a new phase. Rather than accepting decades-old conclusions, specialized units began systematically re-examining unsolved homicides using contemporary forensic methods. Improvements in DNA extraction allowed laboratories to recover usable genetic material from samples that earlier generations of scientists had been unable to analyze successfully. The girl in the box case benefited from that broader shift. Detectives recognized that although witnesses and memories become less reliable over time, properly preserved physical evidence does not lose its investigative value in the same way. Every technological advance created another opportunity to revisit the file. Attention increasingly turned toward investigative genetic genealogy, an emerging field that combines forensic DNA analysis with genealogical research. Unlike traditional DNA databases used within the criminal justice system, this approach seeks biological relationships through publicly available genealogy resources and family tree reconstruction, subject to applicable legal and ethical standards. The process is methodical and often time-consuming. Rather than identifying an individual directly, investigators may begin by identifying distant relatives and then reconstructing family connections across multiple generations. Success is never guaranteed. Many investigations require months, or even years, of archival research, historical record examination, and verification before any conclusions can be reached. Every proposed identification must ultimately be confirmed through independent forensic testing. Assumptions are not sufficient. Scientific confirmation remains essential. For investigators assigned to this case, the emergence of genetic genealogy represented a significant development. It did not solve the homicide by itself, nor did it identify a suspect. What it offered was something equally important: the possibility of restoring the victim's identity after decades of uncertainty. That distinction mattered. Identifying a victim is not the same as solving a murder. It is, however, a critical investigative milestone. Once a person's identity is established, detectives can begin reconstructing their life rather than focusing solely on their death. Family members may provide historical information. Friends may recall previously overlooked details. Employment records, school records, residences, and documented travel patterns can all contribute to a more complete understanding of the victim's final months. Cold case investigators often describe this process as rebuilding a timeline from the outside inward. Instead of beginning with the crime itself, they work backward through the victim's known history, identifying the people, places, and circumstances that may eventually explain how that history came to such a violent end. The girl in the box investigation had reached precisely that point. After decades during which the file centered almost entirely on forensic evidence and anonymous remains, the prospect of establishing the victim's identity promised to shift the direction of the investigation. The central question would no longer be simply, who is she? It would become, what happened in the days and weeks before her death? Even so, investigators remained cautious. Experience had taught them that cold cases often generate public speculation, particularly when new forensic developments are announced. Detectives therefore emphasize the importance of distinguishing verified findings from unconfirmed theories. Every investigative step required corroboration through documentary records, laboratory analysis, and, where possible, independent review. That careful approach reflected a broader principle of homicide investigation. Scientific advances can open new investigative paths, but they do not replace evidence. Every conclusion must remain grounded in facts capable of withstanding scrutiny in both court and historical record. As the investigation entered its next phase, the evidence collected nearly half a century earlier continued to serve the same purpose it always had. It preserved the possibility that one day, despite the passage of time, the victim could be identified and the circumstances surrounding her death examined with greater clarity than had ever before been possible. For the detectives who inherited the case, that possibility represented more than scientific progress. It represented the enduring obligation of law enforcement to pursue unanswered questions, regardless of how much time has passed. While the homicide remained unsolved, the investigation itself had never truly ended. It had simply been waiting for the tools capable of carrying it forward. The search for an identity is often the most difficult stage of any unidentified victim investigation. A name is not simply a label attached to a file. It is the key that unlocks everything that follows. A name leads investigators to records. Records lead to relationships. Relationships lead to timelines. And timelines can reveal the events that eventually led to a crime. For the investigators handling the girl in the box case, the absence of a confirmed identity created a barrier that seemed almost impossible to overcome. The victim could not speak. There were no known relatives available to provide answers. There were no confirmed personal records connecting her to a life before the crime. The investigation had to begin with what remained. physical evidence, scientific analysis, and the determination to continue searching. During the decades following the discovery, advances in forensic science gradually transformed the way law enforcement approached unidentified victims. Investigators began to understand that old cases were not necessarily lost cases. Evidence collected years earlier could hold information that earlier generations of technology simply could not reveal. This change represented a major shift in criminal investigation. Previously, detectives often depended on direct connections, a witness recognizing a photograph, a family member reporting someone missing, or a suspect leaving behind identifiable evidence. Modern forensic methods created another possibility. Science could sometimes create connections where none had existed before. One of the most significant developments was the expansion of forensic genealogy. This approach allowed investigators to examine genetic relationships in a broader way, using DNA information to identify potential relatives and reconstruct family connections. The process, however, was complex. Unlike a traditional database search that might produce an immediate match, genetic genealogy requires patience and careful analysis. Investigators and researchers examine genetic links, build family trees, review historical records, and eliminate possibilities until a likely identity emerges. Every step must be verified. Every conclusion must be supported. A possible connection is only the beginning of an investigation, not the final answer. For cold case detectives, this method offered something that had been missing for decades: a path forward. The importance of identifying unknown victims extends beyond solving a single crime. It gives families answers that they may have spent years searching for. It allows investigators to reconstruct a person's life instead of viewing them only through the circumstances of their death. For decades, the girl in the box case represented that unresolved question. There was a victim. There was evidence. There was an investigation. But there was no confirmed story. The introduction of new forensic techniques changed the direction of the search. Instead of asking only what happened at the crime scene, investigators could begin asking broader questions. Where did this person come from? Who were her relatives? What records existed from her life? Who might have known her? These questions transformed the investigation from a search for an unknown victim into an attempt to rebuild a human history. This process is often slow and requires cooperation between multiple specialists. Detectives, forensic scientists, genealogists, and researchers may all contribute different pieces of information. A laboratory may provide a genetic profile. A genealogist may identify possible family connections. Investigators may then examine historical documents to determine whether those connections fit the known facts. The final identification process must be handled carefully because mistakes can have serious consequences. A wrong identification could affect innocent families, misdirect an investigation, and create additional harm. For this reason, investigators rely on confirmation. A hypothesis must become evidence. A possibility must become a fact. That careful approach has changed the outcome of many cold cases around the world. Cases that remained unanswered for decades have been reopened. Victims who were once known only by numbers or descriptions have received their names back. Families have finally learned what happened to loved ones who disappeared. The girl in the box case existed within this broader transformation of forensic investigation. The passage of time, once considered the greatest obstacle, became less powerful against advancing technology. The evidence had survived. The investigation had survived. And the possibility of answers remained. However, identifying a victim is only one part of a homicide investigation. A name can open the door. But behind that door are more questions. What was the victim's life like before the crime? Who were the people around her? What events brought her to the location where she was discovered? And most importantly, who was responsible? For decades, investigators had been unable to move beyond the first question. Now, With new scientific tools available, the investigation could finally begin exploring the questions that had remained hidden for so long. The focus shifted from anonymity to history, from remains to a person, from a cold case file to a life that had once existed outside the investigation. Every unsolved case carries a similar challenge. The passage of time creates distance, but it does not erase responsibility. Evidence may become harder to find. Memories may become harder to trust. But the need for answers remains. The girl in the box case continued to demonstrate why cold case investigations matter. Because behind every unidentified victim is someone who is known by others. Someone who had a past. Someone whose disappearance affected people, even if those connections were hidden for decades. The investigation had moved into a new era. The tools had changed. The methods had changed. But the central mission remained exactly the same. To identify the victim. To understand what happened. And to pursue the truth, no matter how much time had passed. As the investigation moved deeper into the era of modern forensic science, the nature of the case began to change. For decades, the greatest obstacle had been the absence of identity. Without knowing who the victim was, investigators were forced to work outward from a single tragic discovery, searching through countless possibilities without a clear direction. But once science offered new opportunities, the investigation could begin moving in a different direction. The focus was no longer only on the circumstances surrounding the discovery. It was also on reconstructing the life of the person behind the evidence. This change represents one of the most important developments in cold case investigations. A victim is not defined by the moment they are found. A victim is a complete person with a history that existed before the crime. Investigators working unidentified person cases often describe the process as rebuilding a life from fragments. A biological sample may provide a connection. A record may provide a location. A family relationship may provide a name. Each individual detail may seem small, but together they can create a picture that was impossible to see before. In the girl in the box case, decades of unanswered questions meant that investigators had to approach the evidence with patience and caution. The passage of time created challenges that could not be ignored. Documents may no longer exist. People who knew important information may no longer be available. Communities change. Places change. Memories become less certain. Yet time can also preserve something unexpected. Evidence. When properly collected and stored, physical evidence can remain valuable long after an investigation appears to have reached a dead end. Advances in laboratory technology continue to expand what scientists can learn from material that earlier investigators could only preserve. This principle has transformed the way law enforcement views old cases. A cold case is not necessarily a closed case. It is a case waiting for the right information. Across the United States, specialized investigators began creating new strategies for reviewing unresolved crimes. They examined old files, reconsidered previous assumptions, and applied technologies that did not exist when the original investigations began. The process required both science and history. Scientific analysis could provide new clues, but investigators still needed to understand the human story behind those clues. A genetic connection alone does not explain a person's life. It does not reveal friendships, decisions, movements, or circumstances. Those answers come from traditional investigation, interviews, records, research, and careful reconstruction. This combination of modern technology and traditional detective work became one of the most powerful tools available in solving decades-old cases. However, every breakthrough also required responsibility. Cold cases often attract public attention, especially when new developments emerge after many years. The desire for answers can sometimes create pressure to move quickly. But investigators understand that accuracy must come before speed. A confirmed identification must be supported by evidence. A theory must be separated from fact. A possibility must be tested before it becomes a conclusion. This careful approach protects not only the investigation but also the people connected to it. For families of missing persons, unidentified victim cases carry a unique form of pain. There is uncertainty without closure. There are questions without answers. There is often no clear moment when grief can begin because the truth remains unknown. The identification of a victim can change that. It does not erase what happened. It does not undo the loss. But it restores something fundamental: recognition. A person who existed only as an entry in an investigative file becomes someone with a name, a history, and a place in the world. That transformation is one of the central reasons cold case investigations continue. The goal is not simply to solve an old crime. The goal is to acknowledge a life. As forensic science continued to evolve, investigators gained access to methods that earlier generations could not have imagined. The same evidence that once seemed silent could now provide information. The same questions that remained unanswered for decades could finally be approached from a new perspective. The Girl in the Box investigation reflected this broader movement in criminal justice. It showed how patience, preservation, and scientific advancement could work together across generations. The detectives who first handled the case and the investigators who continued the search years later were separated by time, technology, and circumstance. But they shared the same objective: to find answers, to understand what happened, and to ensure that the victim was not forgotten. The investigation also demonstrated a difficult reality of homicide cases. Solving a crime is rarely the result of a single dramatic discovery. More often, it is the result of countless small steps taken over many years. A report carefully written. An evidence sample carefully preserved. A record carefully reviewed. A question asked one more time. Progress in cold cases often arrives quietly. Not with certainty, but with possibility. Not with a complete answer, but with a new direction. For decades, the Girl in the Box case existed in that space between mystery and discovery. The evidence remained. The questions remained. And investigators continued searching for the connection that could finally bring the past into focus. The case was no longer limited by the tools of the past. It was entering a period where science could revisit history, where technology could examine what time had hidden, and where an unidentified victim could finally move closer to becoming a person whose story could be told. The passage of time changes every investigation. In the beginning, detectives are often surrounded by urgency. Evidence is fresh. Witnesses may still remember details clearly. The community is still searching for answers. Every phone call could bring a breakthrough. Every interview could reveal a missing piece. But as years become decades, the nature of the work changes. Cold case investigators inherit not only evidence, but history. They inherit the decisions made by previous investigators. They inherit the unanswered questions left behind. They inherit the responsibility of examining old information with new perspective. In unidentified victim cases, one of the most important tasks is reviewing the original investigation without assuming that earlier conclusions were wrong or incomplete. Instead, investigators ask a different question. What information exists today that did not exist before? Advances in technology have repeatedly changed the possibilities of criminal investigation. A piece of evidence that once appeared limited may now contain information that could not previously be detected. This shift has been especially important in cases involving victims who remained unidentified for many years. The challenge is not simply finding evidence. The challenge is understanding evidence in the context of new scientific capabilities. Modern forensic investigations often combine several fields of expertise. Laboratory scientists analyze biological material. Investigators review historical records. Researchers examine databases and archival information. Genealogists may study family connections and historical documents. Each discipline contributes a different part of the answer. But none of them works alone. A genetic connection, for example, may suggest a possible family relationship. However, investigators must then verify that connection through additional evidence. They must establish that the information matches the known facts of the case and that the identification is scientifically supported. This process can take considerable time. Behind every successful identification are often months or years of careful research. The public sometimes sees only the final moment, the announcement that a victim has been identified or that a major investigative step has occurred. What is less visible is the work that comes before it. The review of old reports, the comparison of records, the examination of evidence collected decades earlier, the conversations with specialists, the careful elimination of possibilities. Cold case investigations are built on persistence. The girl in the box case remained a reminder of that reality. For many years, the investigation represented one of the most difficult situations law enforcement can face: a victim without a confirmed identity and a crime without a clear path to resolution. The absence of information became the central obstacle. Who is she? Where did she come from? Who knew her? What happened before her death? Each question depended on the answer to the one that came first. Her identity. This is why identifying unknown victims has become a major priority for investigators around the world. Every unidentified person represents more than an unresolved case number. Behind the evidence is an individual whose life existed beyond the investigation. There may have been family members who continued searching, friends who wondered what happened, communities that never received an explanation. The work of identification is therefore not only about solving a crime. It is also about restoring a connection between the victim and the people who lost them. As new investigative methods developed, many agencies began creating dedicated cold case programs. These teams focused specifically on crimes that had remained unresolved for years, applying modern techniques while preserving the lessons learned from earlier investigations. Their approach was based on a simple principle: time should not determine whether justice is possible. A crime that occurred decades ago is still a crime. A victim who is forgotten by records is still a person. And unanswered questions remain important, regardless of how long they have existed. The evolution of forensic science has shown that investigations do not always move in a straight line. Sometimes progress comes quickly. Sometimes it arrives after decades of waiting. Sometimes the smallest overlooked detail becomes significant only after technology catches up. This is why preserving evidence is so important. The investigators who collected and stored evidence years earlier could not know what future science would reveal. They could not predict the development of technologies that would later transform criminal investigations. But by preserving that evidence, they protected the possibility of future answers. That possibility became the foundation of many cold case breakthroughs. The story of the girl in the box case is part of a larger conversation about how society remembers victims of unsolved crimes. When an investigation remains unresolved for years, there is a risk that the victim becomes known only through the circumstances of their death. Cold case work challenges that outcome. It asks investigators and communities to look beyond the crime scene, to recognize that every victim had a life before the investigation began. Every unidentified person had experiences, relationships, and a history that existed long before they became part of a case file. Restoring that history is one of the most meaningful goals of modern investigative work. And as technology continued to advance, the possibility of answers became stronger. The case that had remained silent for decades was entering a new chapter. Not because the past had changed, but because the tools used to examine the past had changed. The evidence was still the same. The questions were still the same. But for the first time in generations, investigators had new ways to search for the truth hidden within that evidence. The journey was not complete. Identification was only the beginning. Because once a victim receives a name, investigators can finally begin searching for the story behind that name, the life that came before the crime, the events that led to tragedy, and the answers that had remained out of reach for so many years. For investigators working on decades-old cases, the moment a victim is identified is not the conclusion. It is the beginning of a different investigation. A name changes everything. The person who was once represented only by evidence can now be connected to a real history. Investigators can search for relatives, review personal records, examine previous locations, and begin reconstructing the years, months, and days that came before the crime. In homicide investigations, understanding the victim is often the first step toward understanding the offender. A person's relationships, routines, and circumstances may reveal information that was invisible when the victim remained unidentified. This is why victim identification has always been considered one of the most important goals in cold case investigations. Before a victim has a name, every possible direction is uncertain. After identification, the investigation gains a foundation. Detectives can begin asking more specific questions. Who was part of this person's life? Who had contact with them before their death? Were there unexplained changes in their behavior? Were there people who knew more than they originally shared? These questions form the bridge between identification and accountability. However, even with modern forensic tools, solving a cold case remains a complex process. Technology can reveal connections, but it cannot automatically explain events. A genetic link does not tell investigators what happened. A document does not tell the entire story. A location does not always reveal intent. Every piece of information must be placed within a larger timeline. This is where traditional detective work remains essential. Investigators must combine scientific findings with human information. They must examine records, verify statements, compare evidence, and determine whether different pieces of information truly connect. The strongest investigations are built through cooperation between disciplines. Science provides possibilities. Investigation provides context. Verification provides certainty. Throughout the history of criminal justice, many cold cases have demonstrated this same pattern. A breakthrough rarely comes from a single piece of evidence discovered in isolation. More often, it comes from the combination of old evidence and new methods. A report written decades earlier may become important. A forgotten record may provide a missing connection. A preserved sample may finally reveal information that was impossible to obtain in the past. The passage of time can create obstacles, but it can also create opportunities when technology develops. For the investigators who continue working on unresolved cases, patience is one of the most important qualities. There is no guarantee that every question will receive an answer. Some cases remain difficult despite advances in science. Some evidence cannot provide the information investigators hope to find. Some mysteries remain because the truth has disappeared with time. But the purpose of cold case investigation is not based on certainty of success. It is based on commitment. The belief that every victim deserves to be identified. That every family deserves answers. And that every unresolved question deserves to be examined. The girl in the box case represents many of the challenges faced by investigators around the world. It demonstrates the difficulties of working without an identity, the importance of preserving evidence, and the impact that scientific progress can have on investigations separated from their original time period. It also reflects a larger truth about criminal investigations. Justice does not have an expiration date. The tools may change. The investigators may change. The world around the case may change. But the responsibility remains. For decades, the victim existed only through the details recorded in an investigation file. The circumstances surrounding her discovery became known, but the person behind those details remained hidden. Modern investigative efforts aim to change that. They seek not only to answer what happened, but also to restore the human story that existed before the tragedy. Because every cold case contains two investigations. The first is the search for facts. The second is the search for the person. And in cases involving unidentified victims, those two missions are inseparable. The evidence tells investigators what occurred, but identity tells them who was lost. That distinction is at the heart of every effort to solve a case that has remained unanswered for years or decades. The continued examination of old evidence shows that time does not erase the importance of a victim's story. New generations of investigators inherit these cases because the questions remain meaningful. The search continues because someone, somewhere, is still waiting for an answer. And behind every file, every photograph, every piece of preserved evidence, there remains the same fundamental question that began the investigation. Who is this person? And what can be done to finally tell their story? In the investigation of unidentified victims, the search for answers is often measured not in days or months, but in generations. A detective who begins the case may never see its conclusion. Evidence collected by one team may be examined years later by another. Technology unavailable during the original investigation may eventually become the tool that changes everything. This is the reality of cold case work. It is a process built on continuity. Every investigator becomes part of a longer chain, carrying forward information gathered by those who came before them and preserving it for those who may follow. For cases involving unidentified victims, that continuity is especially important. The passage of time can separate investigators from the original circumstances of a crime, but careful documentation allows future generations to continue the search. Reports, photographs, laboratory findings, and preserved evidence become a record of what was known and what remained unknown. The challenge is that time changes everything around a case. Communities grow and transform. Buildings disappear. Roads are redesigned. People move away. Witnesses age. Memories become less certain. Yet the original questions remain. Who was the victim? What happened before the crime? Who was responsible? These questions do not disappear simply because decades have passed. Modern cold case investigations often begin with a complete review of the original file. Investigators examine previous conclusions, revisit evidence, and determine whether advances in science or new information can provide additional insight. This process requires discipline. A new investigation cannot be based only on the hope of finding a different answer. It must be based on the possibility that new methods can reveal information that was previously unavailable. Forensic science has repeatedly demonstrated this possibility. Advances in laboratory techniques have allowed investigators to recover information from evidence that once appeared limited. Improved databases have created new opportunities for comparison. Digital records have provided investigative paths that did not exist in earlier decades. Each advancement changes the landscape of what is possible. However, technology remains only one part of the process. Behind every scientific result is an investigative decision. Someone must determine which evidence deserves renewed attention. Someone must ask new questions. Someone must follow the information wherever it leads. This human element remains central to every successful investigation. Cold case detectives often describe their work as a combination of science and persistence. Scientific methods can reveal connections, but persistence is what keeps investigators searching when immediate answers are unavailable. That persistence is especially meaningful in cases where the victim has remained unidentified. A missing person's name represents more than a piece of information. It represents a family connection, a personal history, a life that existed beyond the circumstances of the crime. Restoring that identity allows investigators to look beyond the final moments and examine the person who came before them. The process can also bring answers to families who have spent years living with uncertainty. For relatives of missing persons, not knowing what happened can create a unique form of suffering. There is no confirmed ending, no complete understanding, and often no opportunity to properly grieve. Identification can change that reality. It provides recognition. It provides a place in history. And it allows a person's story to be remembered accurately. The investigation surrounding the girl in the box case reflects the broader evolution of how society approaches unresolved crimes. In previous generations, many cases reached a point where investigators had exhausted the available tools. Today, those same cases may be viewed differently. Not as impossible, but as unfinished. The difference is significant. An unsolved case is not necessarily a case without answers. It may simply be a case waiting for the right evidence, the right technology, or the right moment. This perspective has changed how law enforcement agencies approach older investigations. Rather than allowing time to close the door permanently, many agencies continue reviewing cases when new opportunities emerge. The goal is not only prosecution. It is truth. A complete understanding of what happened. A recognition of the victim. And, when possible, accountability for those responsible. Every cold case carries uncertainty. Investigators must work carefully because the passage of time can create gaps that cannot always be filled. Some evidence may no longer exist. Some witnesses may never be found. Some questions may remain unanswered despite every effort. But the effort itself remains important. Because every investigation represents a person. Not a file number. Not a headline. Not a mystery. A person. The search for answers in the girl in the box case demonstrates the importance of remembering that principle. Behind every forensic examination and every investigative decision is the responsibility to acknowledge the life connected to the evidence. The work continues because the questions matter. The search continues because the truth matters. And the investigation continues because time may delay answers, but it does not remove the need for them. The investigation of a cold case is often a study in patience. Unlike active investigations, where information may arrive quickly and events are still unfolding, cold cases exist in a different environment. The original moment has passed. The immediate opportunities have disappeared. Investigators are left with what remains: evidence, records, memories, and the determination to understand what happened. For the detectives who take responsibility for these cases years later, the first challenge is understanding the past. They must study the decisions made by previous investigators. They must examine what evidence was collected. They must identify which questions were answered and which questions were left unresolved. Every old case file tells a story. Sometimes that story is incomplete. Sometimes important details are hidden within hundreds of pages of reports, photographs, and notes created by investigators from another era. Modern cold case teams approach these files with a different perspective. They are not searching only for mistakes. They are searching for possibilities. A detail that appeared insignificant decades earlier may become meaningful when examined through modern technology. A connection that once seemed impossible may become visible through improved investigative methods. This is one of the reasons evidence preservation is so important. The future of an investigation may depend on decisions made long before anyone knows what future science will reveal. A sample collected decades ago may later provide information. A document stored in an archive may later answer a question. A photograph may later reveal a detail that earlier investigators could not recognize. Cold case work depends on protecting these possibilities. The investigation of unidentified victims also carries a unique emotional responsibility. Detectives are not only investigating a crime, they're attempting to restore a person's place in history. For years, unidentified victims are often remembered only through the circumstances of their discovery. The location, the evidence, the unanswered questions. But those details represent only the final chapter of a much larger story. Before becoming part of an investigation, the victim had a life. There were experiences that shaped them. There were people who knew them. There were moments that existed far away from the crime scene. Finding an identity allows investigators to move beyond the final event and begin examining the complete human story. This shift is important because homicide investigations depend heavily on understanding relationships. Many crimes are solved when investigators can answer questions about connection. Who knew the victim?
Who had contact with them?
Who benefited from their disappearance? Who had information that was never revealed? Without identity, those questions cannot even be asked. That is why the identification of a victim represents such a significant turning point. It transforms an investigation from a search for a person into a search through a person's life. The development of modern forensic genealogy and advanced DNA analysis has changed many investigations that once appeared impossible. These methods have provided new opportunities, but they have also required investigators to adapt. The process is careful. Scientific findings must be interpreted correctly. Potential relationships must be verified. Historical records must be examined. Investigators must avoid assumptions and allow evidence to guide conclusions. The purpose of technology is not to replace investigation. It is to expand what investigation can achieve. The history of cold cases shows that breakthroughs often occur when different forms of knowledge come together. Science can reveal a connection. Traditional detective work can explain that connection. Together, they can create a clearer picture of the past. For a case that remained unresolved for decades, every new development carries significance. A single discovery may not solve everything immediately, but it can change the direction of the investigation. A closed path can become open again. A forgotten question can become relevant again. A case that appeared frozen in time can begin moving forward. This is the nature of cold case investigations. They are not defined only by how long they remain unsolved. They are defined by the possibility that they may still be solved. The girl in the box case became part of a larger conversation about the importance of persistence in criminal investigations. It represented the challenges faced by investigators when identity, evidence, and time become barriers to justice. But it also represented something else. The ability of modern science to revisit the past. The ability of investigators to continue searching. And the belief that unresolved does not mean forgotten. Every generation that returns to a cold case carries the same responsibility to examine the evidence honestly, follow the facts carefully, and continue the search for answers. Because behind every investigation is a person whose story deserves to be known. And behind every unanswered question is the possibility that one day, the silence will finally be broken. On the morning of February 25, 1957, a college student driving through the Fox Chase section of Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, noticed what appeared to be a cardboard box lying in a brush-covered area beside Susquehanna Road. Believing it might attract unwanted attention if he stopped, he continued on without reporting it. The following day, February 26, 1957, another passerby entered the same area while checking muskrat traps. He discovered that the box contained the body of a young boy and immediately notified the Philadelphia Police Department. Within minutes, detectives secured the scene and launched what would become one of the most enduring homicide investigations in American history. Crime scene. The victim had been placed inside a large cardboard box that originally contained a baby bassinet sold by the J.C. Penney department store. The box had been discarded along a secluded roadside surrounded by dense vegetation, suggesting that the location had been selected to reduce the likelihood of immediate discovery. Investigators carefully photographed the scene before removing the body. Tire impressions, footprints, and surrounding vegetation were examined, but no evidence immediately identified the individual responsible for leaving the child there. The box itself quickly became an important exhibit. Detectives traced its retail origin and interviewed businesses that had sold similar products, hoping to identify a purchaser. Although this effort demonstrated the thoroughness of the investigation, it did not produce a suspect. The victim. The child appeared to be a white male between 4 and 6 years old. He measured approximately 3 feet 3 inches, 99 centimeters, in height and weighed about 30 pounds, 14 kilograms. His light brown hair had been cut shortly before death, with small clippings still adhering to his body. Investigators noted signs that the haircut appeared recent, prompting speculation that it may have occurred shortly before the child's death. The boy was found unclothed. Wrapped only in a blanket, his body showed evidence of having been cleaned after death. Medical examiners also documented multiple bruises and injuries in various stages of healing, suggesting that some injuries had occurred before the fatal event. These findings raised immediate concern that the child may have experienced repeated physical abuse. Autopsy findings. The autopsy determined that the child had died from blunt force injuries. Additional observations included signs of severe malnutrition and indications that the child had suffered prolonged neglect. The exact timeline of every injury could not be established, but investigators concluded that the boy had endured significant hardship before his death. His fingerprints were taken immediately. Dental charts were completed. Detailed photographs were preserved. Hair samples and other forensic evidence were collected according to the standards available in 1957. Recognizing that identification was the investigation's highest priority, detectives distributed the child's description nationwide. The search for a name. Philadelphia police launched one of the largest identification efforts of its era. Thousands of missing child reports from across the United States were reviewed and compared against the victim's physical characteristics. Investigators visited orphanages, foster homes, hospitals, schools, and children's institutions. Doctors, teachers, social workers, clergy. Anyone who might recognize the boy's face was contacted. The child's photograph appeared in newspapers throughout the country. Flyers were distributed. Television stations carried the story. Despite unprecedented public attention, no confirmed identification emerged. The child became known simply as the boy in the box. Public response. The discovery shocked Philadelphia. Citizens brought forward hundreds of tips. Some believed they had seen the child in neighborhoods throughout Pennsylvania. Others suggested possible missing children from neighboring states. Every credible lead was investigated. Most were eliminated through interviews, records, or forensic comparison. As weeks turned into months, investigators realized that the greatest obstacle remained unchanged. No one had reported the child missing in a way that matched the available evidence. Without a confirmed identity, determining where he had lived or who had cared for him became extraordinarily difficult. Early investigative challenges. The investigation unfolded during a period when law enforcement lacked many of the forensic tools available today. DNA profiling did not yet exist. Computerized missing person databases had not been developed. Communication between police departments relied heavily on mailed reports, telephone calls, and manual record searches. Detectives depended on witness testimony, fingerprints, dental records, and persistent investigative work. Although every available method was employed, none succeeded in restoring the child's identity. A case that refused to fade. Unlike many homicide investigations that gradually disappeared from public attention, the boy in the box case remained a recurring subject of discussion in Philadelphia. Each anniversary renewed calls for information. Successive generations of detectives reopened the file, reviewing the evidence with fresh perspectives and applying advances in forensic science whenever possible. The investigation would continue for decades, surviving changes in personnel, investigative methods, and technology. For many detectives assigned to the case, one objective remained constant. Before the murder could truly be solved, the child had to receive his name. That goal would guide the investigation for more than 65 years and ultimately become the key to one of the most significant breakthroughs in the history of American cold case investigations. Within hours of the discovery, the Philadelphia Police Department began what would become one of the largest homicide investigations in the city's history. Detectives understood that identifying the child was the essential first step. Without a name, every subsequent question, including where he had lived, who cared for him, and who might be responsible for his death, would remain difficult to answer. The crime scene was processed using the forensic standards available in 1957. Investigators photographed the area, documented the position of the cardboard box, collected the blanket in which the child had been wrapped, and preserved clothing and other trace evidence found nearby. The cardboard box itself became a significant exhibit. Detectives traced it to a shipment of baby bassinets sold through J.C. Penney stores and attempted to identify its retail distribution. Although investigators narrowed the shipment to a specific group of stores, the records available at the time were insufficient to identify a purchaser. The child's fingerprints were taken and distributed to law enforcement agencies. Dental charts were prepared in the hope that a dentist might recognize the patient. His physical characteristics, including approximate age, height, weight, hair color, eye color, and distinctive scars, were circulated nationwide. Police also commissioned facial photographs and later created plaster facial reproductions to aid identification. The investigation quickly expanded beyond Philadelphia. Detectives contacted police departments throughout Pennsylvania and neighboring states, comparing the child against missing person reports. Hospitals, orphanages, foster care agencies, schools, and charitable institutions were asked whether they recognized the victim. Thousands of records were reviewed. Despite the unprecedented effort, no confirmed identification emerged. One of the most perplexing aspects of the investigation was the apparent absence of a matching missing child report. Detectives expected that the disappearance of a young child would have been reported by parents, relatives, guardians, or caregivers. Instead, every comparison failed to establish a definitive match. Medical examiners documented evidence that the child had suffered significant physical trauma before death. They also observed signs suggesting long-term neglect. These findings influenced the direction of the investigation. Detectives considered the possibility that the child had lived in circumstances where abuse had gone unnoticed or unreported, though no conclusion could be reached regarding his background or living arrangements based on the available evidence alone. As public interest grew, newspapers across the country published photographs and descriptions of the unidentified boy. Civic organizations assisted by distributing posters, and citizens responded with hundreds of telephone calls and letters. Many tips were investigated, but most were eliminated after interviews and record comparisons. Investigators also examined the location where the body had been found. The secluded roadside appeared to have been selected because it offered limited visibility from passing traffic. Detectives interviewed local residents, utility workers, hunters, and others familiar with the area, hoping someone had noticed unusual vehicles or activity before the discovery. No witness provided information sufficient to identify a suspect. During the following months, the investigation entered a pattern that would repeat for decades. New leads periodically emerged, were carefully examined, and ultimately failed to produce a breakthrough. Nevertheless, the case remained active. Detectives preserved the physical evidence, maintained detailed investigative files, and continued reviewing new information as it became available. Although the identity of the child remained unknown, investigators were careful to preserve every item that might one day benefit from advances in forensic science. That decision would prove critical. Techniques unavailable in 1957, including modern DNA analysis, would eventually provide opportunities that the original investigators could not have anticipated. By the end of the first year, the central questions of the case remained unchanged. Who was the child? Where had he lived? And who was responsible for his death? Those questions would continue to guide the investigation for decades, shaping one of the most enduring cold cases in American criminal history. As the years passed, the investigation entered a new phase. The initial wave of public attention gradually subsided, but the case itself never closed. Instead, it became one of the Philadelphia Police Department's longest-running homicide investigations, periodically revisited whenever new information, forensic techniques, or witness statements offered even the slightest possibility of progress. Throughout the 1960s and 1970s, detectives continued comparing the unidentified child against missing person reports from across the United States. Each potential match required careful verification. Investigators reviewed medical records, dental information, family histories, and physical descriptions. In every instance, the available evidence failed to establish a confirmed identification. One of the most widely discussed investigative developments came from a woman, later publicly referred to as Martha. Years after the murder, she contacted authorities and claimed that her abusive foster mother had purchased a young boy whose description resembled the unidentified child. According to her account, the boy was subjected to severe abuse before his death, after which his body was allegedly disposed of in the area where it was eventually discovered. Detectives investigated the information extensively. They examined the details she provided, interviewed individuals connected to the account where possible, and compared her statements with known evidence from the case. Some aspects of her description appeared consistent with publicly known facts, while other elements could not be independently verified. Ultimately, investigators did not find sufficient corroborating evidence to establish her account as the definitive explanation for the child's death. As a result, it remained an investigative lead rather than a confirmed conclusion. The handling of the Martha lead illustrates an important principle in homicide investigations. Witness statements are valuable, but they must be supported by independent evidence. Memories can change over time, particularly when many years have passed, and investigators are careful to distinguish between information that is verifiable and information that cannot be confirmed. During the following decades, advances in forensic science gradually changed how cold cases were investigated. The emergence of DNA profiling in the late 20th century transformed criminal investigations around the world. Although the original detectives could not have anticipated these developments, they had preserved evidence carefully enough that later generations of investigators could re-examine it using modern laboratory techniques. The boy in the box case benefited directly from those preservation efforts. Biological evidence retained from the original investigation was subjected to improved DNA analysis as technology advanced. Laboratories were able to recover genetic information with far greater accuracy than had been possible in the 1950s. While this did not immediately identify the child, it created opportunities that simply did not exist when the investigation began. At the same time, the digital age changed access to historical records. Information that once required weeks of correspondence between agencies could now be searched and compared far more efficiently. Detectives revisited archived files, digitized records, and organized decades of investigative material to support future forensic work. The case also attracted continued public interest. Books, newspaper features, documentaries, and television programs revisited the mystery, introducing the unidentified child to new generations. Public attention generated additional tips, although most repeated theories that investigators had already examined or lacked evidence sufficient to justify further action. Despite the many false starts, detectives remained committed to a central objective: identifying the victim. Cold case investigators often emphasize that establishing a victim's identity is more than an administrative milestone. It provides the foundation for reconstructing the victim's life. Once a name is known, investigators can explore family relationships, educational history, medical records, residences, and social connections. These details can fundamentally change the direction of a homicide investigation. By the early 21st century, another major investigative tool had begun transforming cold cases: forensic genetic genealogy. Unlike conventional DNA comparisons, this method analyzes genetic relationships that may extend through distant relatives. Researchers combine DNA results with public records, historical documents, and family trees to identify possible family connections. Any proposed identification must then be confirmed through traditional forensic methods before it is accepted. This approach had already helped solve several previously unsolved cases across the United States. Investigators recognized that it might also provide the breakthrough needed in the boy in the box investigation. As work continued, Detectives collaborated with forensic scientists, genealogists, and specialists in historical records. The process required patience. Building and verifying family trees could take months or years, and every potential connection had to be supported by documentary evidence and laboratory confirmation. For the first time in decades, investigators believed there was a realistic path toward answering the question that had defined the case since 1957. Who was the child? The answer would not come quickly, nor would it emerge from a single discovery. Instead, it would result from the combined efforts of investigators across generations, those who preserved the evidence in the 1950s, those who reopened the case in later decades, and those who applied 21st-century forensic science to one of America's most enduring cold cases. Their work would ultimately demonstrate how persistence, careful evidence preservation, and scientific innovation could converge to solve a mystery that had remained unanswered for more than 65 years. For more than 6 decades, investigators pursued the same objective: to restore the child's identity. Although numerous investigative strategies had been exhausted, the careful preservation of physical evidence meant the case could continue benefiting from advances in forensic science. By the early 21st century, DNA analysis had become substantially more sophisticated than it had been when the evidence was first collected. Laboratories were capable of generating more complete genetic profiles from older biological samples, and investigators increasingly turned to forensic genetic genealogy to assist in identifying previously unknown victims. Unlike traditional DNA comparison, which relies on direct matches in law enforcement databases, forensic genetic genealogy seeks biological relationships through shared ancestry. Analysts compare a DNA profile with genetic information from individuals who have voluntarily participated in genealogy services and permitted law enforcement use under applicable policies. The resulting matches are often distant relatives rather than immediate family members. This process does not produce an identification automatically. Instead, it provides starting points. Genealogists then reconstruct family trees using birth records, census documents, marriage certificates, obituaries, military records, newspaper archives, and other historical sources. Multiple generations may need to be examined before investigators identify individuals whose circumstances are consistent with the available evidence. The work requires extensive verification. Every proposed family relationship must be supported by documentary records. Once investigators develop a likely identification, additional forensic testing is conducted to confirm the conclusion independently. In the boy-in-the-box investigation, this method became a turning point. Working with forensic specialists and genealogical researchers, investigators gradually narrowed the possible family connections. The process involved reviewing decades of historical records and confirming biological relationships through laboratory analysis. The work extended far beyond DNA alone. Detectives revisited archival documents. Vital records were examined. Historical addresses were compared. Family histories were reconstructed. Every new finding was measured against the evidence collected in 1957. Only after investigators were satisfied that multiple independent lines of evidence supported the same conclusion did the identification process move forward. On December 8, 2022, the Philadelphia Police Department publicly announced that the child previously known as the boy in the box had been identified as Joseph Augustus Sorelli. The announcement marked the conclusion of one of the longest unidentified victim investigations in the history of the United States. Investigators explained that the identification resulted from a combination of advanced DNA testing, forensic genetic genealogy, and traditional investigative research. Officials emphasized that no single technological breakthrough had solved the case by itself. Rather, the identification reflected years of coordinated work involving forensic laboratories, genealogists, detectives, and historical record specialists. The announcement answered a question that had remained unresolved since February 1957. The child had a name. For investigators, however, the identification represented a major milestone rather than the end of the homicide investigation. Knowing the victim's identity allowed detectives to begin reconstructing Joseph Zarelli's life before his death. Family relationships, residences, and historical records could now be examined within a confirmed framework rather than through speculation. During the public briefing, investigators released limited information regarding Joseph's family background. They explained that they had identified both his biological mother and biological father through genealogical research. At the same time, officials chose not to disclose every detail concerning surviving relatives, citing the ongoing homicide investigation and privacy considerations. The department also stated that identifying the victim did not immediately identify the person responsible for his death. The homicide investigation remained active. Detectives continued reviewing historical records, interviewing individuals where possible, and examining information that had become newly relevant following the identification. Investigators encouraged anyone with first-hand knowledge of Joseph Zarelli's life, family circumstances, or the events leading to his death to contact law enforcement. The public announcement generated renewed national attention. For many observers, the identification demonstrated the remarkable progress of forensic science over the preceding decades. What had once appeared impossible had become achievable through the combination of preserved evidence, scientific innovation, and persistent investigative work. The case also illustrated the importance of long-term evidence preservation. Decisions made by investigators in 1957 to document the crime scene carefully, retain biological samples, preserve records, and maintain the investigative file made it possible for future generations to apply technologies that had not yet been invented. Although one of the case's central mysteries had finally been resolved, significant questions remained. How did Joseph spend the final months of his life? Who was responsible for the abuse documented during the original autopsy? Who left his body beside Susquehanna Road? Those questions continued to guide investigators after the identification was announced. The restoration of Joseph Augustus Zarelli's identity did not close the case. Instead, it transformed the investigation from the search for an unknown child into the search for the complete truth behind one of America's most enduring unsolved homicides. The public identification of Joseph Augustus Zarelli in December 2022 marked a historic milestone, but investigators were careful to explain that it did not solve the homicide. Instead, it fundamentally changed the direction of the investigation. For more than 65 years, detectives had worked from the crime scene outward, attempting to identify an unknown child. Once Joseph's identity was confirmed, the investigation could begin working in the opposite direction, reconstructing his life and examining the people, places, and circumstances that surrounded him before his death. This shift illustrates an important principle in homicide investigations. Identifying a victim provides context. It allows investigators to establish timelines, review family relationships, locate historical records, and determine who may have had regular contact with the victim. Those inquiries often generate investigative leads that were impossible while the victim remained unidentified. Following the announcement, the Philadelphia Police Department confirmed that detectives continued to treat the case as an active homicide investigation. Officials stated that they were reviewing newly available records, interviewing individuals where possible, and reassessing historical information in light of Joseph's confirmed identity. At the same time, investigators emphasized that many practical challenges remained. More than 6 decades had passed since the child's death. Many individuals who may have possessed first-hand knowledge of the events were no longer alive. Memories had faded, documentary records were sometimes incomplete, and the passage of time inevitably complicated efforts to establish a complete account of Joseph's final months. These challenges are common in long-term cold cases. Although scientific advances can identify victims decades after their deaths, reconstructing the surrounding circumstances still depends on traditional investigative work. Detectives must compare documentary evidence, evaluate witness accounts, and distinguish verified facts from assumptions or rumors. After the identification, public interest in the case increased substantially. Journalists, historians, and members of the public revisited earlier theories that had circulated over the decades. Investigators cautioned, however, that previous speculation should not be confused with established evidence. They reiterated that the investigation would continue to be guided by corroborated facts rather than long-standing rumors. One frequently discussed topic involved earlier witness statements and investigative leads that had attracted media attention over the years. Detectives reviewed those materials again, this time with the benefit of knowing the victim's identity. While some historical information became easier to evaluate in context, officials did not publicly state that any previous theory had been conclusively validated by the identification itself. The investigation also highlighted the evolving role of forensic genealogy in modern law enforcement. Originally developed to assist with identifying unknown human remains and, in some cases, criminal suspects, the method has increasingly become an important tool in resolving cold cases that had resisted conventional investigative techniques for decades. Law enforcement agencies have emphasized that forensic genealogy is not a substitute for traditional evidence. Instead, it functions as an investigative lead. Any genealogical conclusion must ultimately be confirmed through independent forensic testing and supported by additional investigative findings before it is relied upon in a criminal investigation. The boy-in-the-box case demonstrated this approach in practice. The identification of Joseph Augustus Zarelli resulted not from a single technological breakthrough, but from the combined efforts of forensic laboratories, genealogists, historical researchers, and homicide detectives working together over an extended period. The investigation also underscored the importance of evidence preservation. Biological samples, documentation, photographs, fingerprints, and other materials collected in 1957 remained available decades later because they had been carefully maintained. Without those preservation efforts, modern forensic techniques would have had far less material to examine. Today, the homicide remains officially unsolved. Authorities have not publicly identified a suspect or announced criminal charges related to Joseph's death. Investigators continue to encourage anyone possessing first-hand information about Joseph's life, family circumstances, or the events surrounding his disappearance and death to contact the Philadelphia Police Department. The identification of Joseph Augustus Zarelli answered one of the case's oldest questions, but it also renewed attention to those that remain unresolved. Detectives continue seeking to determine how a young child came to suffer the injuries documented during the original autopsy, who was responsible for those injuries, and who abandoned his body in the Fox Chase neighborhood during the winter of 1957. More broadly, the case has become an important example in the history of American forensic investigation. It demonstrates how advances in science can complement, not replace, careful investigative work, and how evidence preserved by one generation of detectives can provide answers to another many decades later. For families of missing persons and for investigators working other unidentified victim cases, Joseph's identification offered a measure of hope. It showed that even after more than 60 years, unanswered questions can still move toward resolution when evidence, persistence, and scientific innovation come together. Although the search for accountability continues, one fact is no longer uncertain. The child once known only as the boy in the box has been restored to history by his name, Joseph Augustus Zarelli. The identification of Joseph Augustus Zarelli did more than answer one of the longest-standing questions in the investigation. It became a landmark example of how modern forensic science can assist in resolving cases that once appeared beyond the reach of traditional investigative methods. For decades, the boy-in-the-box case was taught within law enforcement as an illustration of the challenges surrounding unidentified victims. Detectives had preserved physical evidence, documented the crime scene thoroughly, and maintained extensive investigative records. Although those efforts did not immediately identify the child, they ensured that future investigators would inherit a case supported by carefully preserved evidence rather than fragmented recollections. This principle has become increasingly important in modern homicide investigations. Evidence collected today may be examined with technologies that do not yet exist. As a result, agencies across the United States have placed renewed emphasis on long-term evidence preservation, digital archiving, and standardized documentation. The boy-in-the-box investigation is frequently cited as demonstrating why these practices matter. The case also highlighted the growing role of multidisciplinary investigations. Historically, homicide investigations relied primarily on detectives, crime scene personnel, and forensic laboratories. Today, unresolved cases often involve much broader teams that may include forensic genealogists, anthropologists, historical researchers, digital record specialists, prosecutors, and victim advocates. Each discipline contributes a different perspective. Genealogists reconstruct family relationships. Laboratories analyze biological evidence. Detectives verify facts through interviews and documentary research. Together, these efforts create investigative opportunities that would have been difficult to achieve through any single method alone. The identification of Joseph Augustus Zarelli also renewed public discussion about unidentified children and missing persons. Organizations dedicated to locating missing individuals have noted that many unidentified person cases remain open throughout North America. While every investigation is unique, the boy-in-the-box case demonstrated that advances in DNA analysis and forensic genealogy can sometimes restore identities decades after death, provided that usable evidence has been preserved. At the same time, investigators caution against viewing modern technology as a guaranteed solution. Not every cold case contains recoverable DNA. Not every unidentified victim has identifiable relatives whose records can be reconstructed. Historical records may be incomplete, and biological evidence may have deteriorated over time. Scientific progress creates new opportunities, but each investigation still depends on the quality of the available evidence. Another important lesson concerns public information. Throughout the decades, numerous books, documentaries, newspaper articles, and television programs examine the boy-in-the-box case. Public interest generated valuable tips, but it also produced speculation. Detectives have consistently emphasized the importance of distinguishing verified investigative findings from theories that emerged over time. This distinction remains essential in any cold case investigation. A witness statement is not necessarily a confirmed fact. A published theory is not equivalent to forensic evidence. Investigative conclusions must ultimately rest on information that can be independently verified. Following Joseph's identification, the Philadelphia Police Department reiterated that the homicide investigation remained active. While officials confirmed the victim's identity, they did not announce that the circumstances surrounding his death had been fully reconstructed or that a perpetrator had been identified. The department has continued to encourage individuals with first-hand knowledge of Joseph's life or the events surrounding his death to come forward. Even after many decades, previously unknown information can assist investigators in establishing timelines, confirming historical facts, or eliminating uncertainty. The case also prompted reflection within the forensic community. For scientists and investigators, it demonstrated the value of preserving evidence even when immediate results appear unlikely. Decisions made in 1957, careful photography, detailed reports, preservation of biological material, and maintenance of investigative files became the foundation upon which 21st-century forensic techniques could operate. Without those original efforts, later scientific advances would have had far less to examine. Today, Joseph Augustus Zarelli is remembered not only as the victim at the center of one of America's most recognized cold cases, but also as an individual whose identity was ultimately restored through decades of persistence and collaboration. Although the investigation into his homicide continues, his case has already influenced how law enforcement approaches unidentified victims, long-term evidence preservation, and the application of forensic genealogy. More broadly, it serves as a reminder that unresolved investigations can continue evolving long after the original crime. Advances in science, improvements in investigative methods, and the careful preservation of evidence have fundamentally changed what is possible in cold case work. For investigators, the case underscores a simple but enduring principle. Every unidentified victim deserves a name. Every carefully preserved piece of evidence may one day become significant. And every unresolved investigation deserves to be reviewed whenever new tools offer a realistic opportunity to uncover the truth. The Boy in the Box investigation spans more than 6 decades, making it one of the most extensively documented cold cases in American law enforcement history. While the identification of Joseph Augustus Zarelli answered a fundamental question, the case continues to be studied for the investigative lessons it offers rather than for a single dramatic breakthrough. One of the clearest lessons is the importance of preserving evidence. When detectives processed the crime scene in February 1957, they had no way of knowing that DNA profiling would be developed decades later. Nevertheless, the decision to retain biological evidence, photographs, fingerprints, reports, and physical exhibits ensured that future investigators would have material to re-examine as forensic science advanced. This principle now guides evidence management in homicide investigations worldwide. Even when available technology cannot immediately answer every question, preserving evidence creates opportunities for future review. The case also illustrates the importance of thorough documentation. Every interview, laboratory report, crime scene sketch, and evidence log formed part of a historical record that later investigators could revisit. Cold case detectives often inherit investigations that began long before they joined the department. Their ability to understand earlier decisions depends largely on the quality of those records. Modern investigative practice increasingly emphasizes standardized documentation for precisely this reason. Another lesson concerns collaboration. The eventual identification of Joseph Augustus Zarelli required expertise from multiple disciplines. Homicide detectives coordinated the investigation. Forensic laboratories conducted DNA analysis. Genealogical researchers reconstructed family relationships. Historical records specialists reviewed archival documents. Each contribution addressed a different aspect of the investigation. No single discipline solved the case independently. Instead, progress resulted from combining scientific analysis with traditional investigative methods. The case also demonstrates the value of periodically reviewing unresolved investigations.
Cold cases are not static.
Scientific techniques improve. Records become digitized. New databases become available. Individuals who were previously unwilling or unable to speak may later decide to provide information. Because of these changes, many law enforcement agencies now maintain dedicated cold case units that routinely reassess older investigations using contemporary methods. The Boy in the Box investigation has become an example frequently referenced in discussions of unidentified victims and forensic genealogy. It illustrates how technological advances can restore identities that once seemed permanently lost, while also reminding investigators that identification alone does not necessarily resolve every aspect of a homicide. Public interest in the case has remained strong for generations. Books, documentaries, academic studies, and news reports have all examined different aspects of the investigation. While this attention has helped preserve awareness of the case, investigators consistently encourage the public to distinguish between documented evidence and speculation. Historical investigations often attract theories developed outside official inquiries. Some are based on witness recollections. Others emerge through independent research or media discussion. Although such information can sometimes generate useful leads, investigators evaluate every claim according to the same standard, whether it can be corroborated by reliable evidence. That distinction remains essential for understanding the current status of the case. As of today, Joseph Augustus Zarelli has been positively identified through modern forensic methods. His homicide, however, remains officially unsolved. Authorities have not announced criminal charges, nor have they publicly identified a person responsible for his death. The Philadelphia Police Department has continued to state that the investigation remains open. Detectives have encouraged anyone possessing first-hand knowledge about Joseph's life or the circumstances surrounding his death to contact investigators. Even after many years, documentary records, personal correspondence, family photographs, or previously unknown witness accounts may contribute valuable context. For historians and criminologists, the case occupies a unique place in the development of forensic investigation. It bridges two very different eras of criminal justice. The investigation began in an age dominated by fingerprint comparisons, witness interviews, and manual record searches. It continued through the emergence of DNA profiling, digital databases, and forensic genetic genealogy. Few homicide investigations have remained active long enough to reflect such dramatic changes in investigative technology. For the families of missing persons, the case carries another message. Identification can still be possible after decades. Scientific advances have demonstrated that time alone does not determine whether an unknown victim can be named. When evidence has been carefully preserved and new methods become available, long-standing mysteries may still move toward resolution. Yet the case also reminds investigators that science cannot answer every question by itself. Technology may establish identity. It may strengthen evidence. It may reveal previously unknown relationships. But understanding the full circumstances of a crime still depends on careful investigation, corroborated facts, and the continued search for reliable information. Today, Joseph Augustus Zarelli is remembered not only as the child once known as the boy in the box, but also as an individual whose identity was restored through decades of persistence and scientific progress. His case continues to influence investigative practices, forensic research, and the ongoing effort to identify other unknown victims whose names have yet to be recovered. The investigation remains a reminder that every unresolved case represents more than an unanswered question. It represents a commitment to preserve evidence, to pursue credible leads, and to continue seeking the truth, regardless of how much time has passed.